This is what total air supremacy looks like. Here we've got Israeli F-15 fighter jets flying during daylight hours to strike targets inside of Iran. And when you look at their payload or what they're carrying, it's just extra fuel tanks for added distance and guided bombs. No missiles. As in, these aircraft aren't worried at all about the Iranian Air Force or the Iranian surface-to-air missile threat, which is a wild place to be at baseline, let alone 24 to 48 hours from the start of this conflict, at which point Israel achieved air superiority and air supremacy in parts of the country, which, as you can imagine, led to some pretty significant Iranian losses. So today we're going to get into that, the overall battle damage assessment of this 12-day conflict, not just the Iranian losses, but the damage inflicted inside of Israel as well. Now, this overall roll-up that I'm going off of was put together by Mannie Fabian of the Times of Israel, their military reporter over there. Excellent resource, great follow. I'll link all of his work in the description below. Please go check him out. He says the Israeli Air Force carried out over 1,000 sorties, missions, during the fighting. With over 600 aerial refueling operations, thousands of munitions were dropped on hundreds of targets by Israeli Air Force fighter jets and drones. A couple keynotes there. First off, that is a lot of time for those platforms to be utilized. They no doubt needed a little more maintenance and repair now that the ceasefire is in effect. We also are probably going to hear more, maybe in the coming weeks, about Iraq and or Syria permitting Israel to use their airspace for these refueling operations. That has been kept quiet for now, but look, Israel is not conducting these refueling ops in Israel. Maybe Western Iran, but nonetheless, probably Iraq and Syria, which would be pretty notable here. He says the military has estimated some 2/3 of Iran's ballistic missile launchers, around 250, were destroyed in strikes, along with around 1,000 of the missiles. This leaves Iran with around 1,000 to 1,500 ballistic missiles and only around 100 or so launchers. So according to the Israeli estimate here, they essentially cut the Iranian missile stockpile in half, roughly, and more than half, cut the launcher numbers by more than half. So that's a significant degradation of the Iranian ballistic missile threat. They say the military said its airstrikes caused significant damage to Iran's Natanz and Isfahan nuclear enrichment facilities. The U.S. also struck the underground Fordo site with heavy bunker buster munitions. The back half of this video is going to be focused on some updates around the battle damage assessment there. It's still a complete headache to figure out what exactly happened, but we are going to cover it a little bit later in today's video. He says at least 15 top Iranian nuclear scientists who Israel said were working on a bomb were also eliminated in the strikes. He says during the opening strikes on Iran on June 13th, some 30 Iranian military senior leaders were killed. Others were eliminated over the following days. Also, hundreds of IRGC soldiers, including numerous members of the besieged internal security body, were killed in Israeli strikes. And the Israeli estimate here is that at least 610 Iranian civilians were killed. And they're basing that off of the Iranian health ministry. I've not seen at this point a number of wounded, but the apparently agreed upon by Iran and Israel at this point, 610 Iranian civilians killed during the course of these operations. Now, when looking at the Iranian attacks, mostly ballistic or all ballistic missiles and drones, it says Iran launched between 550 ballistic missiles and around 1,000 drones at Israel during the war. So when you break that out over 12 days, that's pretty significant, right? You're talking about, 50 missiles, just under 50 missiles a day, and around, I'm risking doing math here, just under 100 drones per day. It says most of the missiles were intercepted by Israeli and American air defenses at interception rates of around 90%, similar to the rate in Iran's April and October attacks on Israel. Now, I think that generally fits. I think at times, some days, that number dipped down into the 80s from what we can tell, and just by assessing the damage that we see inside of Israel and the number of munitions fired versus the number of impacts reported, it looks like a couple more may have gotten through at times, but I don't think at any point it dipped below, say, 80-85% interception rate. He says at least 31 ballistic missile impacts were reported in populated areas or critical infrastructure sites. Dozens of other missiles struck open areas without causing significant damage. So 31 impacts in populated areas of ballistic missiles is no joke. That's a lot of damage. So when you see the videos and the pictures showing significant destruction in Israel, 31 ballistic missiles will do that. He says the vast majority of the 1,000 drones, which are slower moving but harder to track, failed to even make it to Israel's borders. Just one drone hit a populated area, a home in the northern town of Beit Shean, causing no injuries. So that the Iran at the beginning of the war was estimated to have some 2,500 ballistic missiles and many thousands of drones. So we do have a lot of footage coming out, not just, some showing the missile interceptions, of course. Those are a little harder to catch on camera. A lot of the drone interceptions, again, to Manny's point here, slower moving. So they're easy to record. And we saw a lot of use by Israeli Apache helicopters, which has turned out to be a pretty effective means of defending against these drones. Low cost, and again, the helicopters can go at the speed that's necessary to track these things. Make sure you're over, an area where you want these to fall is another consideration with these drones. Is you don't just want to intercept them anywhere and everywhere. If you intercept the drone over a populated area and it falls with its explosive warhead and detonates in the city center, okay, the actual target wasn't hit, but you still forced a munition to fall in a populated area. So a lot of times with these drones, the helicopter can be incredibly useful. Tracking them for, minutes, longer, half hour at times, to make sure that drone is over an area where once you intercept, not only will any missed munitions fired at the drone impact safely away from any population center, but also as the drone falls to the ground, it's not going to do any real damage. Now, a key note on the interceptions here, France, their embassy in Israel, just put out a note confirming that they actually participated in the defense of Israel here, which is news. They say French military forces did not participate in the attacks on Iran. However, we are defending our bases in the region out of legitimate self-defense. Our ground-to-air defense systems and Rafale aircraft intercepted several Iranian drones that were en route to Israel and passed over our facilities. That was not known before just a few hours ago. So at least at this point, we know that Israel, France, and the United States participated in the shoot down of some of these munitions. There was early rumors that Jordan I think it was just Jordan, may have shot some down as well. I don't think we have confirmation on that. We also don't have any additional information about the U.S. interceptions. The opening salvos, we heard that U.S. forces were involved, but since then, there's not really been anything except for the interceptions down at Qatar, which are, of course, fired directly at U.S. forces. Then in terms of Israeli military equipment losses, despite the incredible claims of multiple F-35s being shot down, there is no confirmed evidence of that at all. We do have evidence of at least 3 Hermes drones being shot down. There was another or 2 added in recent days. Those appear to have been friendly fire. So in total, I'm tracking 3 Israeli UAVs shot down by Iranian air defense during the course of the 12-day conflict. In terms of casualties, Israel says that Iran's ballistic missile attacks on Israel during the 12 days of war claimed the lives of 28 people, all but one of them civilians, and wounded over 3,000. It says the vast majority of the casualties were civilians, with the IDF reporting just 7 soldiers hurt in one missile impact in central Israel and an off-duty soldier killed in Beersheba. So that's the one non-civilian. He was in an apartment building. That was the very last strike, or to my knowledge, the last impact inside of Israel, killed an off-duty soldier in Beersheba. Now, Iran, for their part, as we mentioned in recent videos, continues to claim success and victory. There's a lot of aspects to this, no doubt. If we're exclusively looking at the survival of the regime, yes, Iran succeeded. If we're exclusively looking at the survival of some aspect of their nuclear program, I'd say that has yet to be determined, and more on that here in a minute. But when you look at the overall losses and casualties, I'm hard-pressed to look at this and say that Iran came out on top. Nonetheless, that is the message that the IRGC and Khamenei is putting out to the people of Iran. In a speech just earlier today celebrating that victory, he said, quote, "With all the commotion and all those claims, the Zionist regime was practically knocked out and crushed under the blows of the Islamic Republic. My congratulations to our dear Iran's victory over the U.S. regime. The U.S. entered the war directly because it felt like if it didn't, the Zionist regime would be completely destroyed. It entered the war in an effort to save that regime, but achieved nothing. The Islamic Republic, delivered a heavy slap to the U.S.'s face. It attacked and inflicted damage on the Al Udeid air base, which is one of the key U.S. bases in the region. The fact that the Islamic Republic has access to key U.S. centers in the region and can take action whenever it deems necessary is a significant matter. Such an action can be repeated in the future, too, should any aggression occur. The enemy will definitely pay a heavy price." And he ends by saying, "The U.S. gained nothing from this intervention. Trump greatly exaggerated what happened, and our nuclear sites remain unaffected." So, I'd say probably hyping up that attack on Qatar a little bit much. Yes, the missiles were launched. By all accounts, they were all intercepted. There's no indications of serious damage and no casualties. right now. So, I don't know that I would say attacked and inflicted significant damage there. Nonetheless, this is how it is being presented inside of Iran, is complete and total victory over the United States. In fact, the IRG and Israel. In fact, just a few moments ago, the IRGC issued a statement saying their two key priorities remain in place: the expulsion of the United States from the Middle East and the destruction of the Zionist entity, or Israel. So same language as always coming out of Iran, no question there. Now, I mentioned the big question here is the effects on the Iranian nuclear program. And this one is really frustrating here in the United States that we're seeing this get so politicized and becoming so partisan, because my personal assessment is it's not. This is a national security question, and we just need to know the answers, just need to know the truth. And I'm not entirely certain that we're closer to that today than we were a couple days ago. So just sat through a 45-minute Pentagon press briefing. I'll give you the updates on that. But I want to back it up a little bit because we do have some additional assessments that have come out in recent days, starting with Axios. This is reporting put together by Barak Ravid, quoting some Israeli officials that are chiming in on the battle damage assessment. They start by saying, and this is hands down the most important part, a professional battle damage assessment takes time. And I'm going to do my absolute best to sift through all of this in a nonpartisan way. I don't want the political stuff here to get in the way of this. So maybe I'm risking it with this statement. But the right thing for our president to have said when these strikes took place was that right there. Battle damage assessments take time. We will update you as soon as we have relevant information. I have a feeling that because the first statement was everything was obliterated, completely destroyed, 100% success, there's now a desire to meet that claim with the evidence, and that's causing some of the challenges. So nonetheless, Israel, good move there. Takes time. They say Israeli intelligence services haven't arrived at any bottom lines for now, but we don't think there are any issues, and we have no indications that bunker buster bombs didn't work. Nobody here is disappointed. They added that they believe the Iranian government is still in the process of conducting their own battle damage assessment. In fact, they said, quote, the Iranians themselves don't even have a clear idea what happened to some of their facilities. They mentioned that through some intercepted communications, it sounded like some of the roll-ups being provided by military personnel were not being authentic, as in they were saying that a facility wasn't hit as a facility was completely destroyed and there was nothing left at that physical location. So it sounds like Iranian senior leadership, while in some statements are saying no issue, everything is just fine, there's early indications that they don't even have accurate roll-ups internally quite yet. So that's something to keep in mind. They said, quote, we doubt that these facilities can be activated anytime in the near future. And they added that they believe the Iranian highly enriched uranium at 60% is now buried beneath the rubble at Fordo. So that's the most official Israeli assessment I think we've seen at this point. From what I can tell, those are still unnamed officials, but nonetheless, trying to keep up with all of the different aspects here. The IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, apparently their director, Grossi, in a radio interview said, quote, or not quoting the interview because I haven't been able to find it, unfortunately, so I'm not sure if it was like on a one-off station, but it was quoted here by Jason Brodsky, the policy director at United Against Nuclear Iran, where he says centrifuges at Iran's Fordo nuclear facility are no longer operational due to physical damage from recent U.S. strikes. Rafael Grossi, head of the IAEA, said on Thursday in a radio interview. From what I can tell, I'm seeing folks today say the IAEA said that it's completely destroyed. I think that is the source of that statement. So I haven't seen an official notice put out by the IAEA. I think it's that interview, which again, I'm having a hard time getting my hands on, looking for, and might just be my lack of ability of finding that at this point. I don't mean to suggest it doesn't exist. That interview, I believe, is the source of the IAEA claim, for what it's worth. Then back here in the United States, a couple new assessments. DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, put out a statement yesterday saying, quote, new intelligence confirms what the president has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. If the Iranians chose to rebuild, they would have to rebuild at all three facilities, Natanz, Fordo, Esfahan, entirely, which would likely take years to do. The propaganda media has deployed their usual tactics, selectively released portions of illegally leaked classified intelligence assessments to try to undermine President Trump's decisive leadership and the brave servicemen and women who executed this mission. So that's the DNI, so she oversees the entirety of the intelligence community here in the United States. So there's, I want to say, 17 different organizations inside of the intelligence community. She oversees everything there. Getting a little more specific here, the director from the CIA, John Ratcliffe, said, quote, CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from a historically reliable and accurate source method that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. Now, we are going to get into the DoD briefing here in a moment, but a question was asked about that because Secretary Hegseth cited this CIA statement, and one of the reporters in the room said, what changed? Like, can you share anything about that with us? You say that this is a historically reliable and accurate source. And the secretary's comment was that that would require a top secret clearance for the reporter to have access to that information. So no additional info there. Now, I did tune into the DoD press briefing earlier today, 7 a.m. Central Time, so bright and early. And the president said that this was taking place to defend the honor of the brave men and women that flew the B-2 bombers to carry out the strikes. There's strangely been a little bit of a shift where I've not seen people attacking the pilots or the military members at all over this, but in some cases it's being framed as any skepticism as to the effects of the strike are somehow questioning the patriotism or bravery of our service members. I haven't really seen that, but nonetheless, that's how this press briefing was presented. I did watch the entirety of it to include the question and answers. It ended up being about 30 minutes with about 10 minutes of Q&A. Overall, the first 10 minutes were really just kind of hammering the media on fake news. The next 10 minutes was talking about the soldiers that were involved in the operation, air defenders at Al Udeid. They say there were only 2 Patriot batteries there. 44 soldiers remained on the base. Everyone else was moved off site. They said the oldest there was a 28-year-old captain, which is awesome. Like, that's our military. It's just young folks out there getting after it. They did mention that the strike against Qatar and the use of the Patriot missiles there was the largest Patriot engagement in history, with a lot of that information, they said, remains classified. Anyways, 10 minutes on the media, 10 minutes on our soldiers and the incredible work of our service members, and then 10 minutes or so on the research and development of the GBU-57, the bunker buster massive ordnance penetrator, and then the targeting process for Fordo. There was not, unfortunately, from what I could tell, any part of this briefing focused on updating the battle damage assessment to back up some of these claims of, and Secretary Hegseth used a couple here. He went from decimated to destroyed. I think he's obliterated as well, which none are technically terms we'd use in the military to describe the effectiveness of strikes. So it's a little bit of, kind of just choose whatever you want there. But we didn't get into that in the briefing. A little bit during the Q&A. But some key points here, talking about the development of the GBU-57 in the program, that was really interesting, talking about how this weapon system has been developed for 15 years exclusively for this target. Like, they had people studying Fordo for a decade plus, figuring out not just where these bombs needed to be dropped, but exactly the type of munition that needed to be utilized. And he went through, like, the shocking number of PhDs and how many, like, incredibly smart people. And I think he said over 100 test runs, like live tests of this munition were utilized. In fact, they do have a couple clips showing what this looks like, albeit not against Fordo, because we don't have any video footage from inside of Fordo, at least we don't, publicly, but showing what these bunker buster type bombs do, specifically the GBU-57. And there's a lot of boom there, right? Now, a couple key notes when getting into the actual plan of the strike here that we're learning for the first time. First off, it looks like when you look at the overhead imagery now, we see 3 holes in the ground. And the initial assessment was that those were 3 different impact points for the bombs. Based off of this briefing from the DoD, what they're saying is that prior to the strike, those were ventilation shafts, and you can see some imagery here from the DoD saying they go down and kind of connect into one. So there's one central shaft, 2 coming off the side, and in recent days or weeks, the Iranians covered this up with concrete blocks so the U.S. couldn't use it to strike through, I guess. It was covered. Nonetheless, General Kane said during the course of this operation, the first GBU-57 was dropped to remove the concrete barrier. So it exposed those 3 shafts. Then bombs 2, 3, 4, and 5 entered that exact same hole, 1. So it's 1 entrance point. It's the one right in the middle. And it went down the shaft, penetrated the main shaft. He said the 6th weapon for each one of the target points was flexed to determine if the preceding weapons didn't work or there were not detonations from those munitions as they were dropped. It sounds like those weren't utilized, but then the total number of munitions doesn't add up to 14, so maybe they were. I'm a little confused as that piece. Nonetheless, General Kane, some more details here. He says every one of the weapons hit and went exactly where they were intended to go. And I think that's supported based off the imagery. If you look at the one impact point, again, not 3, but 6 bombs potentially, we'll say 5 bombs going through this one exact location is wildly accurate. He was pressed on the battle damage assessments. And again, I stand by what I said a few weeks ago. General Kane, incredibly professional. Really like this guy. Sticking to the facts. He's not speculating. I'm not seeing him do anything that could even be slightly perceived as political. And I love that from our military. But he said, hey, look, the Joint Force doesn't do battle damage assessments. We leave that to the intelligence community. I'm not entirely convinced on that. However, like we always did battle damage assessments to a degree in the military. We couldn't outsource the entirety of it to the IC. So maybe there's just some component here that is not done within the military. But General Kane, when pushed on battle damage assessments, this is what he went with. He said there's 5 things I can say. 1, the weapons were built, tested, and loaded properly. 2, all weapons were released on speed and on parameter. 3, all weapons were guided to their intended aim point and intended target. 4, all weapons functioned as designed. 5, trail pilots stated that this was the brightest explosion I've ever seen. Again, we kind of have to parse the words here. He was pressed on whether or not by a reporter, would you say that the site was obliterated? And he right out the gate said, look, we don't get into battle damage assessment. I'll have to refer to that to the intelligence community. And Secretary Hegseth kind of came over the top to start dueling, I guess, with the reporter is probably the best way to put it. General Kane is not using those terms. They're also not correct military terms to be using in this capacity. What General Kane is getting at here is what I think is important, and I don't know that was really being speculated against. At least on this channel, we've talked about how, by all accounts, everything the general says here was accurate, where the weapons were built correctly, they were tested correctly, they were designed for this use, they were loaded correctly, they were dropped in the right place, and from what we can tell from the overhead imagery, they impacted where they were supposed to impact. So that's the first part of the equation, which is important information, good to know. And again, I at least was not doubting any portions of that. The big question that remains still unanswered, beyond just statements that we've read through today, is once those munitions went down into the facility, what degree of damage was caused? Now, again, you're dropping 5. If let's say all 5 of those made it all the way down that shaft, you can expect some pretty significant damage. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we have much to go off of at this point, other than, quite frankly, officials saying it did its work. I don't know that we're going to get much more than that. So kind of brace yourself. Now, another big question here was around the enriched uranium and the location of it, something we've talked about in recent videos. That was asked a couple different times of Secretary Hegseth, and kind of some mixed answers. I'm going to play both of them just for the full context. The first one was asked by Jennifer Griffin of Fox News, their Pentagon reporter, where she asked, what about this enriched uranium? That, for what it's worth, not only is Iran saying, yeah, we moved it, what are you guys even talking about? Because, of course, they're probably going to say that. But Grossi, the head of the IAEA, also said, yes, we believe that the Iranians did move that enriched uranium. So I think it's an important question, something we should probably stay on top of. Anyways, this is the interaction with Fox News' Jennifer Griffin.
Highly enriched uranium. Do you have certainty that all the highly enriched uranium was inside the Fordo Mountain, or some of it, because there were satellite photos that showed more than a dozen trucks there 2 days in advance? Are you certain none of that highly enriched uranium was moved?
Of course, we're watching every single aspect, but Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally. What the president says. I'm familiar.
I report about the ventilation shafts on Saturday night, and in fact, I was the first to describe the B-2 bombers, the refueling, the entire mission with great accuracy. So I take issue with that.
I appreciate you acknowledging that this was the first the most successful mission based on operational security that this department has done since you've been here, and I appreciate that. So we're looking at all aspects of intelligence and making sure we have a sense of what was where.
So unfortunately, not a lot of answers on that, but it's a big enough question that another reporter did bring it up as well, saying, hey, come on. A lot of people want to know about this. And the secretary hit more on it here. We'll go ahead and play that.
Yes,
You
right
know
there.
for certain that the uranium was removed from the facility before the B-2 struck?
So I'm not aware of any intelligence that I've reviewed that says things were not where they were supposed to be, moved or otherwise.
All right, so that's essentially where everything sits right now. I'm sorry. I wish there was more concrete data coming one way or another. I feel like right now it's a lot of he said, she said, and it's quite frankly a matter of trust. Like, who do you trust more than others? And I don't like that. I don't like that that's something that we're forced to rely upon. So we'll keep pushing for questions, see if we can get even more details as we go. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.